All right. Well, to avoid more dead air, let's get hopping. I'm going to start us off a little bit talking about the PFP. Obviously, it's something we've been talking about for a long time. I remember very distinctly early on in the project, sort of questions about when are we going to have a PFP, what is it going to look like, etc. We started in earnest really back in early May, thinking specifically around the art for the PFP, kicking around a lot of ideas on what the PFP could be. And you've gotten a sort of drip of updates of, okay, we've engaged a creative director, we've started working on the baseline character, and want to do an update today of where we are in the project, and then also want to share the baseline character and some early thinking on attributes. So this will be the first time that really people outside of the community team or the core team have seen this, so I'm very excited to share. We've also created a channel called PFP Chat that is available to reach out to me with ideas, feedback, etc., talk about it. Want to make sure that we have an openly available avenue for conversations around the PFP. So let's first talk about project update. So we started working with our creative director and developed a baseline character silhouette. And I'll show that later on, but what the baseline character silhouette does is establish a shared shape language across the set. So if you think about PFPs, each of the PFPs you probably know, they look similar in structure or they look similar in shape, but then it's the attributes that differentiate them, make them one of ones, and make them feel special. So the first thing we wanted to really nail was how do we ensure that we have a baseline character that is a portrait for us to be able to paint on top of, but then also makes each character feel a part of a broader set, immediately recognizable as a LinksDAO PFP. That part is done, and I'll share that with you today. The next part that we'll be working on over the course of, we've already started sort of late July, moving into August, is around what attributes should each character have, what are the variations of each of those attributes, and then should they look like. And that will lead towards line drawings and then eventually art that will nail each specific layer or attribute that will live on top of that baseline character. After that, or while we're doing that, we'll start working on designing and building the Mint website. So as you remember from Mint earlier in other projects that you've viewed, there's always an official Mint site. It'll never be dropped anywhere else. There'll be no surprise drops. There'll be no random places in which you can get this. It will only come from the official LinksDAO site. So we'll be designing that site, ultimately building that site, and then writing the smart contract and auditing that smart contract that the site interacts with. When those things are done, so we have all 10,000 of the characters generated, each individual, each with the attributes, but sharing that same base silhouette. Once we have the site up and running and tested and the smart contract QA'd, we'll then in early September take a look at where we are and say, are we ready to launch, and then set a date for launch. So it won't happen earlier than early September. The launch won't happen before then, but at that point we'll say, we now feel like the smart contract is audited and perfect. We feel like the website is ready to go, and each of the 10,000 characters has been QA'd, and we feel incredibly confident about sharing it with the world. Once we then set that date, we'll sort of unveil the ramp cycle towards that date. There'll be a bunch of communication to the Discord, on Twitter, on Instagram, so we can make sure that people are aware. And then we'll also start marching towards the first Mint, which will be available to LinksDAO members, then the allow list, and then public mint. So we'll go into a bunch of detail about each of these aspects in future updates. We haven't finalized all of those details today. Happy to answer questions about things we know and what we don't know later, but ultimately that's the timeline that we're working towards. The next thing I want to cover is the actual base character itself and the available attributes. So Dom, if you could pop those JPEGs into PFP chat. And while you do that, I'll talk about them. So the idea, again, as I mentioned before, was to create a baseline character that has common shape language across the whole set. We want to make sure that there's enough similar about them to where the attributes really drive the special and unique differences. We also, as we went through hundreds of different variations of this baseline silhouette, we really started to hone in on two things that were important. Number one is the right line weight to make sure that we reduce the amount of detail. We went through a lot of options that just had way too much detail. And if you think about this as a PFP it has to crop as a PFP. It has to be recognizable as a PFP. You see some projects that have just too much detail. You have to zoom in a bunch to see what's special about them. We wanted to make sure that it was the right cropping and size and line weight that would allow for you to immediately recognize it while you were scrolling through Twitter or you were scrolling through Discord and know the difference between each one. The second thing is we wanted to have a huge head. And the reason why we wanted to have a huge head is because that head would allow for the most space that we could put a face on it. Smaller head shapes meant that the head really took a back seat. The facial characteristics really took a back seat. And that meant that you just couldn't identify with the character. And we, iterated and iterated and iterated until we found a shape that allowed us the maximum space for face. And then we landed on something that's also evocative of a golf ball. And as you'll see, it's not going to be a golf ball. It's not going to be dimpled. It's not going to be a golf ball itself. When it has hair, when it has a hat, and when it has facial characteristics, you won't even notice it's a golf ball, but it'll be evocative of a golf ball. And that circle shape gave us the most space possible for us to present this character as someone that you really want to identify with. Because at the end of the day, this PFP is going to be your visual identification online. We wanted to make sure it was someone that you felt a connection with. So again, in the chat, we'll take ideas, feedback, we'll talk about it. I'll be around for sure. But that's the baseline silhouette that we've landed on. The next part that we need to do then is sort of dress up that baseline character. We need to make sure that each of these shares the common shape language, but also feels each very different, very unique. Some will be very rare, some will be more common, but the idea is the combination of attributes are really going to make each character unique. And what we're landing on is sort of the which of the attributes need to exist. And so if you think about the cropping of that baseline silhouette, there's only so much space for varying attributes. And there definitely we could have too many or we could have not enough. So we're trying to land on exactly the right amount. What you notice in the second JPEG that shared in the PFP chat, we're thinking currently there'll be differences in background color, potentially a background pattern, headwear. So we're thinking about lots of different ideas for headwear. Visors, headphones, backwards hats, forwards hats, old school hats. Like there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of headwear that we could put on this. And again, this is an area where we're looking for ideas. Also hairstyle, the club, the top, the skin color. We're deliberately making a choice because we want to make this an inclusive character that we're not going to use human skin color. We're going to use very vibrant colors that allow for variation across the characters, but don't connote a human red skin type. And so those will be really interesting. We can have patterns, we can have different animal kind of furs, and we're working through all of these different options for that. The hand itself could have a golf glove. You could also think of it having other things like boxing gloves or holding something. So the hand will be a variation. And then mouth, eyes, and sunglasses sort of round out that head. And again, it was very important to us to create a character that you immediately could look at its face and identify with it. And so all of those different facial expressions will form a different type of identity and variation for each character. So these are the ideas we have right now. We're still in the process of, sort of mood boarding and finding reference points and researching different options for each of these attributes. If you have ideas, the most helpful thing would be share a link. So if you have a link to something that you're like, I really like this shirt, this style of shirt is really interesting to me, go ahead and share that in PFP chat and I'll get it over to the creative team. Same thing goes with hats or clubs. Any ideas you have around the attributes will definitely, I have open ears. Where obviously each of these is going to be very unique to LinksDAO. So if there's a shirt you like, we're not going to just use that shirt. We're going to make it a little bit different and make it feel a little bit more LinksDAO. The whole point of this is to not be derivative, to be very unique, and be very LinksDAO. So whatever you send, we'll look at, we'll consider, and we'll discuss it in PFP chat. So last part I have then is just call to action on the PFP chat channel, newly created. I just saw Dom tag folks in there. That's where you'll see the two images that we're sharing today, the baseline character, as well as the current thinking around attributes. Again, these are vanilla, basic, black and white beginnings, but over time, we'll continue to share more and more of the iterations that we get as the characters take shape. But any ideas you have, good or bad, please share in the PFP chat. I'll be all ears and excited to talk to you about it. Thanks for giving me the time.
Thanks for joining us, Bez. We were chatting earlier about this little reveal right here. And I think, do you want to go ahead and kind of talk through some of the high level stuff and we'll hype what we have to, sir?
For sure. I mean, I think I'm happy to kind of dive in and give people sort of a background update on where things stand from a sourcing perspective, and also happy to also walk through some stuff we've looked at on the course front, why we're excited about certain places, why we're less excited, and kind of give people a peek behind the curtain as to what our thought process is and how we've been consulting a whole bunch of people, both formally and informally, as we've been trying to dive into the sourcing and evaluation process. And I think, Tungsten, as you and Coop and I talked about today, we figured we'd share some insight into, I'd say, example courses and case studies, no names basis, to give people an idea of what makes certain things interesting, what makes certain things less interesting, and maybe you can take it from there. And I'm happy to answer questions and share additional insights that people might be looking for. Yeah, so like the first, I'll say, like, example course that we've spent some time on and have reached out to is the Southeast. It's a really well-regarded, I'll say, semi-private, semi-public, depends on whether you look glass half full or glass half empty type person, designed by a very well-known name brand architect. I'll just say that many people call him US Open Doctor, and it's a course that we think is, I'll say, ready to go, not quite turnkey, but in really good shape that we could play golf on tomorrow, which is obviously something that's really appealing to us. But one of the reasons that becomes a little bit trickier has to do with a few other courses here, is that if the course is in pretty good shape, there's a market rate for those tee times right now. There's a market rate for, an annual membership to some of these clubs, even if they're not private. And that sets a benchmark for what people expect to pay. And without the obvious or very clear ability for us and a great architect and designer to come in and elevate any site sort of a much greater level, it becomes hard not to get, overly fixed and anchored on that price point. So this site, really good area, near other publicly accessible golf, which we love. We think our members would appreciate. But at the same time, might not necessarily have the flexibility in terms of elevating it beyond what it is today.
Yeah, I think the community is going to be pretty excited to be able to modify and change courses. It's nice to know that there's courses out there that are kind of turnkey, but yeah, I think the positive there is that we see even more opportunities in front. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the balance that and this will be a trend that through the next 3 or 4 things that I talk about is kind of it's a theme that is consistent throughout them, which is kind of the better the course is, the less you can do with it. And so the upside might not be there. The control and influence that the DAO and the membership want might not be there. But play golf, tomorrow, and the floor in terms of like screwing it up is much higher. Whereas something that being, not so great shape, it has like the bones of being really promising and has a lot of upside, and it's something that we can really like sink our teeth into as a membership. But it's going to take a little while to start playing golf there, and you could still screw it up. So I think that's a sort of a fight that will, sort of have to balance regardless of what entity we end up acquiring. But that's something that we're, constantly thinking about. Next one that I'll reference is a course in the Mid-Atlantic Northeast area. It's designed by probably one of the top 5 greatest architects of all time. Sort of golden age designer. It's definitely a little rough around the edges, but has really great bones. And to my point before, probably really significant upside here. But at the same time, and don't get me wrong, people play golf on it today. Probably don't appreciate it for what it could be. So it has the upside for us to really sort of restore it to its former glory and probably take it to a much greater level, given sort of all of the benefits of modern equipment and money that they didn't have when this was built. Probably I guess like in the 20s originally. So this is the type of course that I think it's kind of outlined a few like archetypes of courses. Thought would be pretty interesting. 6 months ago when we kicked off this project, and this would fall into one of them, which is like significant architectural history, really great bones, tons of upside, and a really fun project for architect or designer to come in and really like sink his teeth into. That's something that I didn't really talk about on the first sort of example I gave, but we're going to want architects and designers to like visit sites with us, give us feedback, share what they think is interesting, because it's probably might surprise us what they think is interesting compared to what we think is interesting, as consumers versus someone who is spending time really in the dirt, and their input and feedback is going to be invaluable. And we want someone who's going to be hyper engaged and excited about whatever the property is. And so that that's a key element here as we think about the decision we're making.
Very cool. Yeah, the old school approach of a course is interesting. When you think about the range of what we could possibly have access to, the lore and the bones and the history of a place would certainly be neat to add our own portion of the story onto. Yeah. I'm sure you guys are having a blast checking these places out. Yeah. What else do we have on our radar?
So there's a couple more that I'll talk about. I guess since not that I'm being specific with names, but with more detail. There's another one that both, by the way, the first two places I mentioned only have 18 holes. And so one of the things that we're really trying to like look for is something that has more than 18 holes on site. And so these next two do. So one course, one property, I guess, in the southeast, we've got 36 holes. It's definitely a project. Again, people play golf there. We probably don't want to play golf there tomorrow. It's also near really great publicly accessible golf. So if you got tired of playing, 36 holes on our course, you could be very happy going and playing tons of other great public golf nearby. Obviously, 36 holes has tons and tons of advantages for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is being able to, engage two different architects, and really, invest in both courses simultaneously, or even leave one course open subpar fashion, because we want people to be able to at least get out there on property while the other course is being renovated, and then we can, flip them. So it just gives us a whole, or even you could you could convert an 18-hole course into, keep 9 of that 18 and have 27 championship holes, and then convert the other 9 into, a short course or an interesting par 3 course or an executive course. It just gives us tons and tons of flexibility that obviously 18 holes doesn't give you. And the last one I'll allude to is also, this one happens to be in the Northeast, sort of Mid-Atlantic area. This one is 27 holes. Again, this one though is actually like very playable. We've had members play it. We've had founding team members play it recently. It's pretty interesting for a bunch of reasons, least of which is it's like in actually like pretty good shape. The greens are quite pure. This kind of goes back to the first course I talked about, which is if something is like really that turnkey? How much can you really do to like elevate it? And I think that's, obviously one thing that, and not just elevate it, but give our members the ability to influence the outcome of that design, which obviously we care a lot about. So those are the four sort of like, I'll call, mini case studies, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up and you can fire questions at me or people in the audience can, that we're officially locked and loaded with Kemper. We're super excited to have Josh Lesnick as our, in some ways, only point of contact, not just primary point of contact out of Kemper. So don't know, Josh was the first general manager at Bandon Dunes 25 plus years ago when Bandon opened. Josh has been, Kemper manages Chambers Bay and Bandon and Sand Valley and Streamsong. We're in the process of figuring out some interesting reciprocal relationships and member access relationships for the DAO as part of our relationship with Kemper. They're incredibly engaged on this project. They've made site visit with us already. They're ready to make more site visits with us and evaluate properties and start underwriting them. And we just sent them 6 more sites to get their feedback on. In addition, which I guess a couple include ones that I talked about tonight. Then there's a few others that we also sent them that I haven't spoken about tonight. They're ready to dig in on and start sending team members out to look at with us. So figure out a Twitter Spaces or another podium and get Josh from Kemper on to talk about why they're so excited about engaging with us on this project, what drew them to this. Initially, we've been talking to Josh since February 2nd. This is like, several months in the making. This wasn't just like a, sort of like, let's just pitch them on working with us or have them just on working with them. It was a very organic conversation in terms of how we got introduced to Josh several months ago. And so we're going to have a Twitter Spaces or podium with Josh on to talk about why they're excited, what they're doing to help us, how they're going to be working with us, how they think about us differently than all the other properties that they manage, because obviously this is exceptionally different than virtually everything that they touch. So we're in the process now of we're now in the process of figuring out when we're gonna get that scheduled once now that the contract is officially locked and loaded.
Yeah, I feel like the news is going to come fast and deep over the next few months. It's going to be nice to hear all the updates from you guys. Bez, I actually had a question. If anybody in the audience has a question they want to ask Bez about these courses or our course acquisition philosophy or anything, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call you up here. I had one for you just while we're looking around. How much thought or conversation is being put into the other amenities that some of these courses may or may not come with? Bigger clubhouses, event facilities, extra land. What do those details look like when we take them into consideration against our primary goal, which is, like you said, 18 to 27 to 36 holes of future championship top 100 golf? What's the rest look like?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely care about the amount of bridge available to us, which allows for building more golf holes or building cabins, lodging for stay and play and on-site guests. So that's a huge factor in any property that we're looking at. And then sometimes we've seen stuff that has already had cabins on site, or they've already sort of got the zoning and permitting done to start building. They just haven't done so yet because they don't have the capital to start doing it. So that's a huge aspect of it. As far as clubhouse, that definitely matters. Most of these places are probably going to require some clubhouse renovation, and making sure that it's large enough to handle a membership of our size. Obviously, the quality of the facilities, the quality of the locker rooms, all the things that that our members are going to really care about. So that's definitely a huge consideration here. I'd say like other amenities, like Do they have tennis? Do they have a pool? Do they have, paddle? Do they have pickleball? Whatever. Say almost everything we've looked at is very, very golf centric. And that these are really golf clubs, or they are, most of the places we've seen are not country clubs because most of what we've looked at is not private. And so there aren't a ton of like semi-private clubs that also have all of these amenities. They're generally just like golf. Certainly something that we're taking into consideration, but I'd say like we're not going to pick, a golf course that's a 7 because it's got tennis and pool and stuff versus a golf course that's 8.5 or a 9 that doesn't have those type of amenities. I think this is a very golf centric membership and community, and so I think that definitely is sort of like a driving factor here. Being said, obviously, if there's property to allow for it, those are the types of things that we'd love to build and put in place over time.
Yeah, I think some of those do actually sound like pretty fun projects to work out with the community. I mean, being a golf-centric community, but also having a side of leisure associated with us, it's almost exciting to think about once we get this course and we have amazing architects working up the course, what can we do on the side of leisure activities to really customize the location and put our stamp on it, put our community's kind of, feel on top of it. It's pretty cool. That's incredible updates. I mean, just fascinating to hear how you guys are thinking about going about the process. And the Kemper News, I'm still thrilled that they're on board with us. Such an incredible partnership, and their exuberation's fantastic. I love it. Bez, thanks for sharing that this evening. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Bez about the course or the acquisition process or anything?
Hey, Bez, while we're waiting for other folks to jump up, I got another one for you. Just curious about, like, if you could talk about probably seeing like a spectrum of cost in these acquisitions. And I know we're still kind of putting final touches on the raise, but curious if maybe more than one property, say more of a project, lower acquisition price, and more of a ready to go, higher acquisition price is something that you guys are thinking about.
It's definitely something we're thinking about. I'd say it would be raise and capital dependent. I mean, we've seen everything from like literally buy this place for $1 because it's so in debt to, we got pitched like a $40 million property.
Wow.
That we all have heard of before. Which, hey, that would have been cool, but like, in a lot of ways less cool because it's like, all right, now we own this thing. One, that's a lot of cash. Two, it doesn't really have that much, give the community the level of influence and sway over the property that I think we all want. It's not fun to just.
No, look, I mean,
easy for me to say, but I think there's something to be said for like the fun element of influencing this outcome and this being like a project. Not just like, hey, let's buy this thing and start, and own X for the sake of owning it. So I think as far as like buying two things simultaneously, that would definitely be the preference. I'd actually say even what we've kicked around, and this, is very far from like official, is different than Ryan's suggestion, which is like turnkey and project, is something between turnkey and project and entirely new build as the second. And we've seen and been pitched multiple new build sites from scratch that are really compelling in some of the most interesting places to build golf courses in the United States. And I think if we had the cash to be able to pull that off, I think that becomes close to an ideal sort of jumping off point where you could have a course up and running in the next 6-9 months or so, and then another course that can go live that's entirely new build within the next couple of years. And then who's to say that there isn't another acquisition in the intervening period of something that's, you know, operational before the new build one is. But ultimately, like what we found out during this process is that like it's really hard to get everything you want out of one of these courses unless you build it from scratch.
Sure, that makes sense. And
which I kind of, you know, like obvious in hindsight, but like also thought that there would be much more that we could do that an architect could pull off. What we're finding is that like there's sometimes their hands are completely tied based on, you know, I'll call it the red tape of permitting and regulation in a particular area when it comes to like just how much dirt you can move at any one time.
That makes sense. And I mean, I guess as far as the new build goes, I mean, couldn't pick a better partner than Kemper in that regard. They've pretty much got that down to a science. So cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Holy Roly, I did see that you had a question a minute ago. If you want to raise your hand again, we'll call you back up here. If we already answered, there you are. Very good. I will get you pulled up here. Yeah, Bez, I think everyone came in here looking forward to regular old podium, and I think you might have just wait a second. She disappeared. What happened? Oh no, try it again, Holly. Yeah, and you go ahead and drop on everyone that 2 sounds great.
Sorry, guys. I'm new to this. I don't know if you can hear me yet.
Yep. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Welcome. All right, fire away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just had a quick question. I know you guys were talking acquisitions are based on availability, but are we looking for courses that are somewhat accessible off, you know, a major transit for people? I know there's going to be a lot of people traveling or flying in. Are we looking for stuff that's relatively near a major hub or somewhat accessible to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at, I'd say there's 2 different types of sites. We've looked at something that's, you know, near a very, very major airport and stuff that's near a call regional airport, not like tiny, not like they have like 2 flights a day type of thing, but not like a major international airport. And so everything we've looked at has been within probably like a 90-minute drive of either one of those 2 types of locations. So we're super cognizant of the fact that people are, you know, all likelihood, the vast majority, not in all likelihood, likely, like guaranteed that the vast majority of people are not going to be near wherever this first course is. And so we want to make sure it's as accessible as possible. We did look at a site very, very briefly that would have been incredible, and it's not completely off the table yet as far as maybe a second or third location, but an absolutely incredible property that is incredibly hard to get to for basically anywhere in the world unless you like live within driving distance. And it would be an absolutely amazing site and cause complete chaos in the golfing world if we ended up buying it. But it's basically takes like 12 hours to get to. There's just no way around like how long it takes to get there, regardless of where you're flying from. And for that reason, we kind of like
let's just get the LinksDAO airport going. You know, we'll do a little fundraise this winter, no problem.
Yeah, for that reason, we've kind of like shelved that one, but it's a pretty amazing place.
Yeah, I mean, look,
until this regional airport decides to start having a lot more flights, I think it's kind of we've kind of punted on it.
Yeah, I think in the interest of the members and accessibility and affordability, you know, within that 90-minute range, something that's drivable or reachable by a Link shuttle, even if it means costing us an incredibly prestigious and disruptive course, feels like the right direction for everything. And exciting to know that we're kind of keeping that as the North Star, even if we are presented big, fancy, shiny objects on the side, like $40 million properties or places that are 12 hours from humanity.
Yeah, we're ambitious, but we're not stupid.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the feedback, guys.
Yep.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate you being here. Very nice. Very nice. Let's see. We got another. Someone else want to pop up? Bogey Nick, welcome to the chat. What can we answer for you this evening?
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me up, and thanks for all the work you guys are putting in. And I know everyone's in the chat, when course, this and that. That's not really what I'm asking here. I just have a question about, like, is there a timeline or an idea of when we're going to be less vague about the options and what you guys are looking at? I'm so jealous. Sounds like an awesome time going out looking at these courses for the community. But it's hard. It's hard just listening without going to like Google Images, you know.
No, you're completely right, Bogey Nick. Are you familiar with LinksDAO events from last fall at all? Were you around the NFT space when that went down in the fall, when a group of crazy individuals tried to go buy the U.S. Constitution?
Oh yes, I was
Remember that?
somewhat
Yeah.
aware of that.
We, as a community, I think we're incredibly fortunate that happened before us. The reason the Constitution DAO project didn't work is because we got front run by somebody with more money, because we ran into the classic Byzantine generals problem, which was they knew the size of our army. Our funds were very public, and they knew what we had to top out at, and we were outbid on that. In the interest of avoiding that exact same outcome here with the golf course acquisition, and Bez can dive into a little more detail, the reason we're being so tight-lipped is because we're on a lot of people's radars, and this is not a poor industry that we're headed into, and golf courses are in demand by a lot of people and a lot of groups besides just LinksDAO. So playing it close to the vest is as much a strategic necessity, even if it comes across as a bit of a challenge sometimes in terms of sharing stuff.
Totally. I totally understand that as like a community member watching this go down. And like I said, I appreciate you guys putting in the work. But I was like, my question, so that answers half of it, but I'm more like, is there a timeline for when we get less vague? Like, have you guys thought about that at all? Like, how much before a vote? How much information are we going to get before a vote? Is it going to be, token gated information where we can try to hold it within? Obviously, there's probably token holders that are probably our competitors in the real world, but yeah.
I mean, it's a totally very good question, and really something that we're very
it's tough.
Very aware of. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I'd say, like, as far as the vote, I think we're going to be as specific as we can possibly get without maybe naming the exact course, but any enterprising person would probably be able to figure out what course it is based on all the details that we're going to have to give to get people like conviction around an affirmative vote. Right? We're not going to be able to be like, hey, course in the Southeast, it's pretty good and it has 27 holes. Should we buy it? Yes or no? Like, we're going to have to be a lot more specific than that. Right?
Is there any, have you thought about, like, is there any way we can talk to the sites and be like, all right, you guys have made it into our top 5. You're now like on hold. We're going to take it to the community. And like, we got the right if the community votes your course, but like until that point, you can't like let someone take us out. Or is that not a thing?
That's probably not going to fly. I mean, we went with the owners, Chris Bruce and I met with the owners of a course last week. I'd have a hard time believing that we could just tell them, like, hey guys, just give us a sec while we like run this by our membership. And like, I mean, they had tons of questions about us and our process and how things work. And, we're not going to buy this course in all likelihood. But it was, a very educational process for us. But I think, even in our conversations with Josh from Kemper, he's been sort of like very cognizant that he doesn't necessarily want to disclose too much about who he might be representing when he reaches out to a course behalf, right? Because this project has a ton of interest and buzz and hype around it, and all of a sudden someone might think, oh wow, like these guys just raised all this money from an NFT and they've got tech money and they're raising venture funding, and always involve, like, I might be able to like gouge them in some way. So I think we want to be as transparent as we possibly can, as close to any sort of decision. And we're I'd say we've dropped a fair amount of in some cases it's alpha, in some cases it's just being transparent, even around the architects that we've spoken to. Right? There's in the buy a course chat right now, I'm about to chime in and be share info about who we've spoken with, which these guys are basically naming 3 architects that we've spent time with on the phone, including Andrew Green, who we just had a 45-minute call with last week, who just redesigned Congressional. We just spent, like I said, 45 minutes on the phone with Andrew last week talking about the project and getting his interest in what we're doing. So we're going to be as transparent as we can with lots of different facets here. As far as specific names of properties or courses, I think we're going to have to consult Kemper as to what they think is reasonable, particularly just given they work with Mike Kaiser, who I would say is we don't want to get, to Tungsten's point, we don't want to get Kaisered in the same way that LinksDAO got, or Constitution DAO got griffined. Josh is well aware that he's sort of needs to be tight-lipped when he talks to us about stuff that we think is interesting. Same way that he isn't going to tell us stuff that Mike Kaiser's spending time on.
For sure. Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Yep. Thank you, Bogey Nick. Appreciate you joining us, man. We'll keep pushing to share as much as we can share. And when I say we, half the stuff I want to hear for the first time too. So you got a friend. We're good. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Yeah, very nice, Bez. Do we have any other questions from the audience about the courses at all? Anything else up here on the podium? If not, we could probably keep moving along the agenda here as well. Bez, anything else you want to add at the end, or do you feel pretty talked out on courses? I feel like we learned a ton. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. I'm just glad to get all this off my chest, because it's basically just been rattling around my head for the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, as we've been spending tons of time on this stuff. So good to share with the community more broadly, and we'll have a lot more to share over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks as we're spending tons of time on this stuff.
Very, very exciting. Looking forward to all those future conversations for sure. Speaking of future conversations, I'm going to toss it over to our good friend Eth, who's heading up the marketing pod, for a quick little announcement about recruiting. Eth, you want to share what's going on in the world of marketing and how we want new best friends?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks again, Bez. That was great to hear updates, and glad to hear that things are coming along nicely. So if everybody, yeah, what's up, man?
And yeah, we've got you. I know you and I have a lot more to share and disclose on that front, and hopefully we'll put out
absolutely right.
Some good stuff in the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, looking forward to that for sure. Cool. Well, in terms of marketing, we like to kind of reach out to our community, and we want y'all to be as close to these projects as possible. And in the marketing pod, we're creating a lot of really cool things and putting them out on a day-to-day basis. So we'd like to invite people who are closest to the project to have an opportunity to come in as a copywriter, if you have any graphic design skills, if you're a content creator or you kind of have those interests, maybe you have some audio video, background, or you're good at it, you've got some chops. Would invite you guys, or just kind of remind you, hey, this is a DAO. If you have those interests, come into, ping us, come into the marketing tee box, and raise your hand and say, hey, I've got some time, I've got some energy, I really like this stuff, or I think I could, I can do better, or some things that we can improve on, or you've got some really cool ideas. Come in. We're also going to be utilizing Clarity a lot more, which is our project management system. We're going to be posting bounties in there, and you can earn USDC by doing some of these projects and tasks. So once you're plugged in with us and you're kind of staying up to date with us, we're hosting bi-weekly marketing pod meetings where you can get kind of the update on what's going down, what's the high priorities, what ideas we're working on, and that you can kind of say, hey, I know how to do that, or I'd like to take a stab at it, then, we can kind of get you set up and onboarded so you guys can, do something cool. It can be a side hustle or a side project. You can tell everybody, I'm contributing, or, again, just bringing your creativity. Would really like to talk to you guys. So if you're interested, again, come into the marketing tee box and raise your hand. Let us know. We'll get you kind of on board and send you an invite to the biweekly marketing pod meeting. You can come in and introduce yourself and say hi. If you know somebody, bring them in as well, or you talk to somebody in the community that you think that would do really well in there. Feel free to send them by. And there's incentives built into this. Again, there's USDC. That'll be rewarded to the bounties. And so we're just looking to scale up some of our output. We're going to be working in things, we're looking into, streaming. We're looking into expanding more audio and video. We're looking to expanding, TikTok, or what can we do on Instagram? We like to reach out and talk to people across the golf industry. And so we're going to need people who are enthusiastic and know the project and are able to speak highly of it or in detail. So we want, the people who are most involved in this community being somewhat of an ambassador, but also contributing to growing, our reach and kind of shaping our message as we kind of mature as a growing DAO brand. So again, come by. You can reach out to me, Tungsten, or Liam, if you don't know where to go or where to start again, and we'll get you in the right direction. Yeah. So without further ado, one of the outputs, or what we're working on, you guys might have seen, is the members bounce. So I'm gonna hand that off to Tungsten. He'll have some updates on what's going on in the members bounce this week.
Thanks, Heath. Yeah, I hope you all have seen some of these episodes. I'm going to be pretty disappointed if everyone in this audience hasn't watched them yet. If you haven't, pop over to our YouTube channel and check out our first LinksDAO production series, The Members Bounce. It is a good segue. This has been one of the first projects that we've had community contributions on. A lot of the footage work, the grind work early on in this was handled by some members of the community, and we took the idea from that and kind of ran with opening up the marketing pod for more assistance. It's going to work out pretty well. As far as this week's episode goes, Doug is back on the road. We're going to be mixing it up a little bit this week. We had some technical difficulties on this one stop, so we're going to drop a different flavor of an episode. But to make it fun for everyone, because it's certainly going to be entertaining, but to make it fun, keep a lookout in the video at some point for a secret word to get dropped. We'll make it obvious. It'll be on screen for a second or two, but keep an eye out. You're going to be able to use that secret word to claim a POAP on the POAP mobile app. If you don't have it already, make sure you download it. And that claimed POAP and the raffle instructions that accompany it will open you up for the opportunity to win an incredibly special limited edition prize package for this week's episode. We're talking super limited members bounce hats, super limited Genesis Tour pitch fixes. A lot of really cool stuff is in there. So check out the episode this Thursday. It drops 8 p.m. on our YouTube channel. And keep an eye out for that secret word for a chance to enter to win some more great LinksDAO swag. We really appreciate everyone's support so far. And if you guys have ideas for episodes or tweaks you want to see, we're all ears. We're always open to learn more. Speaking of those open conversations as well, I do want to take a chance to remind everyone who's here. I see a bunch of new members in the audience tonight that our first new member onboarding with Cooper and a couple members of the team will be Monday, August 1st at 8 p.m. Now, there's an event that's posted in the top left of the Discord. It's pinned up there. If you're a new member and you want to take some time to get to know the team, answer some questions, go through a really nice, light onboarding process. We know the Discord can be a little overwhelming sometimes, so we want to make it really easy to get you all in and up into the Discord. So if you're interested in joining Cooper and the rest of us on Monday at 8 p.m. for our first new member onboarding, we'd love to see you there. If you have any questions about that, you can always ping any members of the team. But otherwise, we really appreciate you all joining us this evening. Mr. Senor Hill, thank you so much for starting us off with that PFP stuff. Bez, I know you bounced, but you're the man as always. Thank you for keeping up the hard work right there. Anybody else up here on the podium have anything else to add before we wrap at all?
No, this is great. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for getting all this together, and Dom, thanks for getting the stuff posted in the channel. I think just keep using that channel for the PFP. Just if you have any questions, or if you see anyone else asking questions about PFP, just refer them to the PFP channel. And I'm excited to talk to folks about it.
Nice. Yeah, good reminder. Good reminder. Everybody police everybody here. But in the nice way. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining. We will see y'all in the chats. Keep the vibes high.
Appreciate everybody.
Thanks,
Night, everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.